Welcome, everyone, to episode 3 of the Trail Life North Central Region's Yukon Winter Challenge. We're glad that you've joined us tonight and are here with us as we get started this evening. Just want to remind you that we are in our third meeting, and if you would like to participate in the other ones, or you know of other people that would like to, those recordings are there and we can send those out to them. And so they can sign up just like you did through the Zoom. And tonight we're on January 13th. Our next time will be January 27th. And then we'll have 2 more in February on the 10th and the 24th. And so we're glad that you've joined us. As we get started tonight, Little Hawk is going to come and read some scripture for us and then pray. And so Little Hawk, would you be willing to come and do that for us now?
Go ahead and do it.
Our verse of inspiration tonight is from 1 Corinthians chapter 16, verse 13. Be on your guard, stand firm in faith, be courageous, be strong.
Very good. Would you like to pray for us?
A trailman honors God. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for letting us join together tonight. Thank you for the Trail Life leaders that put the Polar Vortex series together. Thank you for all the trailmen that are here tonight. May these words tonight help us go along our journey in life. We ask for your blessing for the moms and dads that have brought these trailmen to tonight's session. And all of this we ask in Jesus Christ's name. Amen.
And thank you very much, Little Hawk. We are so glad that you've joined us, and at the end, we'll have you pray again, okay? So as your host tonight, my name is Sean V2, and we are going to do a couple of announcements. But before we get there, I want to show you some of the pictures that you have sent in to show off your displays. These first ones are some of the shelters that were made, and as many as have sent them, I've just about used everybody's photos, at least one of them. So please keep sending in your photos. These are some excellent looking shelters that were made. And here's one that used a tarp. Look at that. Yeah, I bet you he had that in his backpack with those 10 essentials. That's an extra one that he put in there. That's really cool. And I really like this one here. That was being ingenious using those branches, probably of the Christmas tree. And well done. We also had some birdhouses that were made. Look at these fantastic birdhouses all the way along here. It is exciting to see young men as trailmen caring for God's creation, being good stewards. Look at that saw that they were probably using there with mom and dad behind. That is really cool. And then this week we had some hiking going on. And to make their packs, do you remember how much your backpack had to weigh? What percentage of your body weight? Was it 10, 20, or 50%? 20, right? It was 20. And so here are some young men using these balls, the Lego balls that put in their bag. You know, another good way to do it is just to use some water jugs. And if it gets a little bit too heavy, you can pour a little bit out and then keep practicing and training. Here's another hiker going along the way. And next time, guys, of this group, I'd like to see a couple more smiles. I don't think this was at the fun part of the hike from the way it's looking here, but you were out hiking and enjoying God's creation. And then here's a hiking stick that was made. This is a really cool one. And here's another hiking stick, as well as big box oven cooking. And so keep up the good work. Keep sending those photos, and we will showcase many of those for you. And well done in that. Hey, we got a couple of things coming up really soon in our area, in our region. This one is especially for those that are in Ohio. And we are making some exceptions. If someone's outside of the state, Mr. Tanner, on a case-by-case basis, especially people that are wanting to take the Yukon adventure back home. So if you want to come from out of state and say, hey, teach us how to do the Yukon, Mr. Tanner, we would love for you to come. Be part of this. It's a great time. This is outrageous adversity this year in 2021. There's 2 places, the north, where we've had snow the last 2 years, and in the south on February 19th through 21. Now, here's the secret. Like Mr. Tanner said, there is a true polar vortex dropping from the North Pole. in these last 2 weeks of January and the first 2 weeks of February. It's going to get bitter cold outside, guys, and so it'll be a great time to practice along. Along those lines, we just want to let you know about something that is important for especially our adventurers. Adventurers. We had a meeting last night. We just want to keep you knowing what to do. We have 14 trailmen that have applied so far. We're really excited about that. We can take 2 more. That'll make a team of 21 right now. And we are looking for backups as well, because here's the thing. You got to have your down payment in by March 31st this year, $200. You got to have some skin in the game, and that is not refundable. If you can't go, that becomes part of the trip fund. And also, another thing to keep in mind is a required shakedown trip that will be in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan near Pictured Rocks. That will be June 11th through 13th. So you have to be able to do that. You need to have a Troop Master reference letter and also some badges that we want you to have done by the time we take off on the trip. Your faith building navigator, as well as first aid, trail skills, outdoor life, and emergency preparedness. So that is really looking forward. And as we are talking now about Alaska, it is time for us to come to Mr. Kent Marks. Can I hear some drums rolling as we get started? He has talked us so far through Skagway and the Chilkoot Trail, and tonight he's taking us off at the Canadian border. Next time it'll be Lake Bennett, and then Dawson City, and then finally to the Goldfields. So, Mr. Kent, would you take it away, please?
Absolutely, absolutely. Hey, I am dressed for tonight because we are on top of the coastal mountains in our adventure to the Goldfields. Remember, 2 sessions ago, we met up at the town of Skagway. We built our shelters, and we got ourselves acclimated to this place called Alaska. Well, Alaska, we had to climb the Chilkoot Pass, and the Chilkoot Pass took us to the border. Now, remember, the Chilkoot Pass is a steep climb. We had to carry a lot of gear, over 1,000 pounds of gear up this pass. How many times do you think it would take for a grown man to carry 1,000 pounds? I'd say 70, 80 pounds per trip. So that's about what, 14, maybe 13, 14 trips. It's a lot of trips up. The fun part of it is when you go down, you just get on your butt and slide down the mountain. But taking your gear to the top, we're going to talk about that today. The Chilkoot Trail takes us to the Canadian border crossing. And the Canadian border crossing is a place where you had to take your gear, you set it at the top, and you place it in a pile. And the Canadian Mounties would not let you enter Canada. I'll say here's a map of, we can see the Skagway and the little arrow that takes us up to Dawson City. Let me tell you a little bit about it. You see over there to the right, it says all Canadian route. So when word got out that there's gold in Dawson City in Yukon Territory, word got out, but it took a year for that word, for the news to get out to the world. Well, when the news got to England, a lot of people in Britain wanted nothing to do with stepping foot on American soil. So they didn't go up the coast up to the rich man's route, which is taking the Yukon River on a steamship, or they didn't go to Skagway and hike the trail to Dawson City that way. They went to Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. And Edmonton, now that's a stepping off point into the Yukon, into the Canadian wilderness, up through the Northwest Territory, up into up to Yukon. Here's the thing: they got bad information. They said that they were told that if they made it to Alberta, to Edmonton, Alberta by July, that they could make it to Dawson City before the bad weather. That was bad. That was bad information. So I want to tell you, this is true. Over 70% of those that left Edmonton, Alberta, Canada in 1897 or 1898, either of those 2 years, if they left Edmonton after July 15th, over 70% of them perished. That means they did not make it. That means they died. The ones that stayed, a lot of them turned around and wised up and came back. But those that continued on, 70% of those perished in the cold wilderness upper Canada. So that's not the way to go. The way we're going is we're going to Skagway. We're Skagway and up the Chilkoot Pass, and we are now at the border. So let's move this on to the next one. So hey, check it out. Even way down in Seattle, the San Francisco Shoe Company, we pulled this up because this is interesting. There were all kinds of merchants that wanted to sell their wares to those prospectors. And this is an advertisement from the San Francisco Shoe Company. It's actually, they're actually from Seattle. And look at those boots and shoes. Look at that boot on the left. It's got a heel. I'm not sure if that boot really would work when you're hiking in the wilderness, but a lot of people bought into this. They bought all these boots and spent a lot of money. And I wanted to show you right here on the screen. If you take a look, I have a sample vial of gold. This is what they were heading. They were heading to the Yukon, up to Dawson City and the gold fields for this product right here, for gold. Did you know in the city of Dawson, 1897, 1898, 99, that gold was the standard use of exchange. So you bought things with your gold if you had it. So anyway, this is one of the advertisements. We'll see some more as we go through this. But in order to be allowed into Canada, the Mounties set up a checkpoint to ensure that each of the prospectors and miners had the proper gear. Now, when we say proper gear, here we go. This is an example. The picture that you just saw there, that was a quick glimpse of it. There we go. The Canadian Mounties were in charge of the border. They did not want thousands of miners entering into Canada without the proper gear. And they actually had checklists. We may post that sometime. It's really interesting what's on that checklist. Actually, I brought a couple items here to share with you, but we'll get to that in a minute. Anyway, if you look at here, these stacks of gear on the right, and there's stacks on the left, and there's stacks up ahead. The folks had to carry at least 1,000 pounds of gear, and it had to be useful. It couldn't be ladies' boots, that something that you didn't need. It couldn't be mementos from home. It had to be useful gear to help you get through the wilderness of northern Canada into the Dawson fields. So this was an example of this is an actual photograph of these miners. Now here's an interesting thing. 99.9% of the folks were honest because they were all in the same boat. They all had to work together. And when they carried their gear, they stacked their gear in their little spot and nobody touched it. Every once in a while, if the gear was not sufficient, they had to return to Skagway though. So, but if their gear was not sufficient, they had to hike 33 miles back, the Chilkoot Trail back to Skagway, and then 33 miles return trip to the Golden Staircase, which is on the Chilkoot Trail, to the top, and then satisfy those Canadian Mounties that they had the proper gear. So when we say gear, we're talking about supplies. We're talking about food. What would be a good supply? What would be a good food supply? Bacon, salted pork, anything that could stay for a while. Hey, check this out. The miners, this is called a whipping at sheep camp. This person that's the last to the pole, he was at 0.1% that actually stole from someone's gear at the top of the Chilkoot Pass. And maybe it was 99.9% because this is in public. And when this guy was whipped, no one else wanted to steal anything. Maybe that's why everyone was so honest. Well, I wanted to show this photograph here. So anyway, when they're at the top of when they're at the top of the coastal mountains at the border of Canada, once the Canadian Mounties let them through, they were able to head on to Lake Bennett. And Lake Bennett drains into the river called the Yukon River, which takes you to Dawson City. Now, let me show you a few things here that I have. As you see, we're wearing these hats tonight. Now, this may be a sample of the hats that was worn back then. Maybe it's not, but we just want to, all three of us want to try to look in character. I'm going to show you a little bit. Remember we talked about layering? When you layer, I have a t-shirt, I have a shirt, I have a vest, we'll have a big coat, we'll have an extra coat. I have some fur. So here's the thing. When you used your clothing, you wore most of your clothing. You didn't carry a lot of extra clothing. You wore your clothing, and it's like a thermostat. If you get too hot, you unzip your outer piece and it cools you down. If you get too cold, you zip it back up and that takes the temperature back up. So you're controlled by the layers of clothing that you wear. And they did that back then as well. If you look at these guys here, look at all that gear. Look at the stacked gear, and each pile was a different mining party. It wasn't necessarily one person, it was a party. However, each person had to have 1,000 pounds of gear per person. So you'll see bigger piles because maybe there's 3 or 4. However, when 3 or 4 get together, that makes it stronger for that group to be able to work together and to get to the gold fields. So let me show you some things here real quick. I've got a sample metal canteen. All right, this is just a sample. It's nice and big. And right now it's empty. I'm just acting like I'm drinking out of it. However, this was a staple. You had to have canteens. Now, back then they didn't have water faucets. You just walked to the local river or local stream and you dip this canteen down in the water and you drank from the stream. You wanted to watch. You wanted to look upstream and pay attention to nature. You want to pay attention to the stream just came through an open field with a bunch of dead trees. Well, guess what caused those dead trees? Beaver. Beaver, when they poop and pee in that water and you're drinking the water, you're going to have belly aches. So you want to pay attention to the source that you're getting water from out in the wilderness. Stay away from water that comes through stagnant fields of dead trees and lakes and ponds that look like they're not natural. That's beavers. So anyway, we want to go and talk to you guys about the memory verse. It's 1 Corinthians 16:13. Be watchful, stand firm in the faith, act like men, be strong. That's some good advice for these adventurers out there. Let me show you real quick. I've got a case here. I'm going to take the camera and tilt it down a little bit so you can see the case. All right, we're going to open this thing up. In the Yukon, you often carried your sacks of grain. This is actually white grits. All right, this is a way of carrying them. You bring your ammo because we all carried our ammo. We all carried our guns. We had to sometimes forage and shoot our food. I met an Alaskan Eskimo, and he sold me an uru knife. You guys ever see this? This is a staple of Alaska. It's an uru knife. And check this out. This thing is very sharp. Look at that. Look at that. Look at that wood come up. This is an uru. So I took this with me because I felt that would be very helpful. And a lot of the prospectors had backup plans. If they couldn't make it in the gold fields, they had a product that they would sell. And I just brought my collection of belt buckles because all those prospectors out there have belts and sometimes their buckles break. And I figure if I take belt buckles, I might make my fortune on the belt buckles. And if anything, I'd sell these for $20, $30. They're worth about $1. Sell them for $20, $30 and make my fortune that way. And this one's made out of copper. This is steel. This is brass. These could be melted down and turned into ammo. So there's a multiple use. And this was considered a staple that the Canadian Mounties would approve. So I don't know where I'm at, Sean, but that's about all I have for tonight.
All right. So we have a couple more slides, Kent, that give your gold nuggets tonight. And the first one is from the Trailman's Handbook. Read about preparing for a backpacker and camping trip. You will find a list of 10 essentials necessary to carry for every hike, trek, and adventure in the camping field guide. Collect these 10 items and place them in your day pack. This will be in your setup, and this is what those guidebooks look like. Moms and dads, if you have not bought a set of these yet for your Trailman, this is $20 for that set. They're well worth it. They're laminated, and you can use those. And there's the list that will be available as well for you and the information that you'll receive in an email. So there's an optional 11th. Gold Nugget Challenge number 2. Kent, you want to tell them about that?
Yeah, so here's an important thing. That list that Sean just showed you, that's in the field guide, anytime and every time you grab your day pack, that gear should be in there ready to go. You don't put it together 5 minutes before you leave. You have it ready for whenever you need to go because it's your emergency. You got your pocket knife, you got your water, you've got your essentials with you. And you take that essentials and you put them in a carrying device. Now I say carrying device, it could be a day pack, a backpack, a wool blanket wrapped up is the actual way that a lot of the prospectors carry their gear on their back. They carried it in a wool wrapped up blanket and rope. But take a hike to the wilderness spot along a trail, prepare and eat lunch using only those items from the 10 essentials. Part of those items in the 10 essentials should be a snack or some type of food item. Now, you know, you can tank up a little bit on your food items if you know you're going out, but utilize what you have and understand each tool and each item in that day pack or whatever pack you're carrying. There's 10 essentials. Take a look at each essential and understand that there's multiple use for each essential in there. You have a rain jacket. It'll take care of the rain. It'll block the wind. It'll keep you warm. It's something you can sit on. So right there is 4 different uses for a rain jacket. That's the example. So this is a good challenge. On that hike, now this is a real challenge. I'm going to show you the photograph here, or a drawing I made. This is actually a Canadian geese, a Canadian goose, okay? That's a goose, not a geese, it's a goose. On your hike, if you see a Canadian goose, take a photo of that goose. Now, don't take a book with a picture of a goose on your hike and then you take a picture, take a photo. That doesn't count. It's got to be a real live goose out in the wilderness. So take other pictures of what you found out there. God's creation, God is amazing. When you hike in the wintertime, if you're in the northern part like we are, in the north central region, God has opened up his creation by taking the foliage away. You can actually see rock formations. You can see valleys. You can see creek cutouts that you don't normally see in the summertime because of all the leaves and the grass. So take pictures of the creations that you find interesting. You know, there's something about hiking along a trail and finding a red rock. Where'd that red rock come from? But that's something interesting. God placed it there for a reason, for you to take notice of that. So find something that you think is really of importance to you and take a photograph of it and make sure you take care of the light. Take a picture of whatever you see in the proper light. Stand in the way where the sunlight's hitting just the best. And that's what photographers do. All right.
Thank you, Kent, so much for that. All right, we are going to be heading on from the Canadian border passing. And as we do tonight, Caleb Brownlee from Troop 360 has prepared a video for us on knife sharpening on the trail. You may have watched this already, but we're going to showcase it here again tonight. And so without further ado, here we go.
Hi, I'm Caleb. I'm with Troop OH360 out of Valley View Village, Ohio, and I'm going to talk to you today about camping pocket knives and how to sharpen them. Let's start by taking a look at a few common examples of knives that might be carried by trailmen. Over here on the left, we have 2 small Gerber knives. On the right, we have 3 different size Kershaws. We also have 2 nice examples of some multi-bladed knives, an Uncle Henry penknife and a classic Swiss Army knife. And although these knives have their differences, there are a couple common traits when it comes to blades. One being that the steel used is generally a softer steel, which means that it will not hold an edge as long, but it will be easier to get a sharp edge back on them. Number 2 is that they share the same basic profile, meaning that most of these blades are straight and then curve up to the point. Thirdly, they all share the same basic grind, meaning the edge here is a saber grind, which is a double beveled, double-sided, symmetrical knife grind. To get a better understanding of the saber grind geometry, let's take a closer look. What I've drawn here on the board is a sliced view of the blade geometry, meaning that if I were to take this knife here and cut the blade in half and look at it on end, that's what this picture represents. Now, a saber grind is a double beveled blade, like we talked about, and this first large bevel here is generally going to be 10 to 15 degrees. On some knives, it may be more, it may be less. This saber grind also has the secondary bevel, which is what you're actually going to sharpen. Do not make the mistake of trying to put this big bevel on your stone and trying to sharpen it. The part that you're actually going to focus on sharpening is the small secondary bevel on your blade. On most knives, it's whether or not you have a saber grind, you can look and see that there is generally a shiny secondary edge on the blade. That is how you know you have a saber grind.
Where are you going?
Let's take a closer look at what you could take out in the tray with you. These here are some simple ways to do that. This is a piece of MDF with some fine and super fine grit sandpaper glued to it. And this one here is a piece of planed hardwood with a leather strap and fine grit sandpaper glued to the back. Both of these you can make on your own very easily. Just be sure that when you glue it down, that you don't leave ridges from the glue. To do that, you can use a small J roller like this, or a bigger one. We also would recommend sometimes using a spray adhesive, which is easier to get a consistent glue up. Now that we've taken a look at the knife profiles in different sharpening systems, let's take a look at how to sharpen your knife while out on the trail. Let's look at some of the technique of sharpening. First, I'm going to show you how to ensure that you're on your secondary bevel. So you're going to take a Sharpie marker, carefully just cover that secondary bevel with Sharpie on both sides. Lay it flat on the primary bevel, and then you're going to slowly rotate it up, and you should feel a slight flat spot, and that was your secondary bevel. So you're going to slowly pull it toward yourself, lightly, rotating it up, applying light pressure just a couple times, and then you can see on that secondary bevel, up towards the tip of the knife, I'm holding my angle pretty well, but right in the middle here, I need to go a little higher on that secondary bevel. So we're actually going to tip the knife backwards a little bit, meaning that it's flat. I brought it too far forward, so I'm going to lay it a little bit flatter this time. You can see now there's still a little bit left, but I took a bunch of that extra off of there. Now, the Sharpie is really good when you're at home, but out on the trail you're probably not going to have it. So I like to put a little bit of water on my stone, which does a couple things. It helps the sandpaper last longer because you are removing the metal chips from the sandpaper, and it will also help you tell whether or not you're at the right angle. So spread it out first, just use your finger, and then again you're going to lay it flat, roll it up, and you'll actually kind of see the water kind of beat up if you do it right. So you can see here, water is kind of beaten up onto the edge of the blade because it has nowhere else to go, because the blade is contacting the sandpaper at the correct angle. Now, this won't help you from tipping too far forward, but if you have a habit of tipping too far back, like laying it flat here, see how it's not rolling up onto the blade much? That's because I'm laying it straight flat on the primary bevel. When I roll it up, it rolls onto the blade just a little bit. A lot like a squeegee. Also, with these saber grinds, you want to keep track of how many strokes you take on each side to keep the blade symmetrical. So you can do it side to side like this, go up that way, pull that back that way, or if you get in a comfortable position where you're hitting that angle right, at 1, 2, 3, 4, and then do the same number on this other side. Another tip is when you're learning to sharpen, try and keep your arms as tight to your body as possible, because it's a lot easier to move your whole body in a repetitive motion rather than having your arms out here trying to keep that repetitive motion. So keep your elbows locked kind of close into your hips and just turn your whole body. And also, be careful when you're pulling back towards yourself not to push too hard so you don't hurt yourself as you're sharpening your knife. Another thing is, when you're out on the trail, you ideally want to look for a picnic table or an old stump to set this on and do it. But as long as you're practiced and it's okay with your leaders, you can also hold it in your hand and push away. And then when you go toward yourself, be careful not to go too far and cut yourself. Just light, easy strokes. Starting in a flat spot, pushing, and slowly rotating, lifting your hand up. Lifting your hand up. Not like this, because you are doing two motions at once. You are curving this way and also lifting the blade that way to stay on the secondary bevel. And again, that's where the nice Sharpie trick comes in, because if there's a black left on the edge, whether at the top of the edge or bottom of the edge, that's how you can tell whether or not you need to go up more or keep it rolled back a little more to make sure you're getting that whole consistent edge to keep your knife symmetrical and the same. Once you are done sharpening with the sandpaper or stone, next you will go to the strop. Now you want to make sure that if you're taking a strop out with you, that before you go, you load it up with compound to make it work the best. Now when you're stropping with a Swiss Army knife like this, or any slip joint knife, meaning that a knife that doesn't have a lock on it to keep it from closing, you have to be extra careful to not, when you're drawing backwards, to not make it close on your fingers. Now with the strop, you're going to find that angle, and you're actually drawing backwards, like putting light pressure, drawing backwards, putting a nice polished edge, and refining the edge to make it slice better. And sometimes, like say you maybe got shavings for a fire, or you use your knife to cut some rope or something, sometimes just running the strop across your knife is all you need to get your edge back to razor sharp and ready to use. Once you've practiced in sharpening your knife, a good way to test if it's sharp is to cut a piece of paper on edge. Now if you don't be discouraged if you have trouble sharpening freehand, because it takes a lot of practice. So just have some time and get out there and have fun learning the art of sharpening.
All right, that was well done by Caleb, and we are so excited to have some more of these videos coming out. I think we have one slot or two open for an adventure. And if you have a tip for the trail that you would like to do that maybe was used or you thought would be useful when you were on the Klondike, we would love to see that from you. As we continue ahead now tonight, we are moving forward to our time with Eric Tanner, Yukon cold weather camping training. And I'm going to turn it over to him now and his special guest, Jody, this evening. Take it away, Eric.
Welcome, Trailman. Didn't Caleb do a fantastic job, guys? That's just awesome. Tonight you're in for a real treat. Jody Bialois from Troop OH0520 is going to talk about emergency shelters, and it's the theme of keep it over. Keep it over you, keeping something to protect you. We've seen in Mr. Marks's presentations how much gear everybody had to take. I'm sure some of it you could see in the background, some of those were tents. Well, sometimes if you get caught out and you haven't been prepared, but you've got your day pack, you've got an emergency shelter. Well, tonight you're in for a real treat because Jody and his son David Trailman, he's a navigator and he's helping out with this video. So with that, Sean, if you could roll that video, we're gonna see what they've got in store.
Don't you enjoy the outdoors?
Yeah, but I want to see animals. Why don't we see any animals out here? I want to see a deer.
Well, perhaps try and be a little quieter and you might succeed at doing that. Animals are frightened by noise.
Hey, doesn't this look familiar? That creek and that old bridge, I think we've seen that before.
Yeah, it's all looking familiar. I think we've been through here already. Pretty sure we're lost. It's getting dark. There's a storm moving in. Probably gonna have to hunker down for the night. Just relax. We'll get through this. We'll make it through the night. Let's go through our day packs and see what we got. Okay, so let's go through what gear we have. I'll go through first. Go over like the key things we've got. So I got water, more liquids, striker, flashlight, pocket knife, and in this main pocket here we've got rain gear, jacket and pants, spare jacket, more water, some toilet paper, never known you might need that, some snacks, and then I've also got first aid kit, contractor trash bag, some rope, and a tarp. So what do you got?
I got poncho in case it rains. I got some water, a little bit of it. And I got Skittles.
That's all you have? Who taught you how to pack for a hike? Looks like we've got maybe an hour before it gets dark and the storm gets here. As it gets night, the temperature is going to drop. We're also going to have some rain and maybe some snow. The wind's also probably going to pick up a
We're
bit.
gonna die!
Calm down. We have what we need. We'll get through the night.
How can you be calm? We're lost. We're gonna die!
It is God who arms me with strength and keeps my way secure. We have what we need to get through the night, and we have God on our side. We're going to need to set up a shelter to protect us from the rain and wind during the night. First, we're going to have to find a location that has brush and vegetation around that will help protect us from the wind, and we need a spot that won't collect rain.
What about this side here?
Yeah, if you want a tree to fall on you in the middle of the night. Okay, so this is the spot we'll make our emergency shelter. It's good because we're kind of higher in elevation and the slopes are kind of away from us, so the water will be draining out. The area right here is also relatively flat and clear of brush, so it won't be too hard to make the shelter and there won't be a hard laying on it. So there's going to be some rain and or snow tonight. The wind is also going to be coming from the west. We can tell that's west due to the sun. So we're going to want to have the emergency shelter sloped downward here so that the wind's not coming through it. We're going to need to clear out some of the twigs here so we have a place to lay. Okay, we're going to want to gather up a bunch of these leaves to essentially make a bed, which will provide us some padding and insulation from the ground.
All right.
This looks good. It's nice and thick. It's gonna help protect us from the cold of the ground. We still might get some moisture from the leaves though, so we're gonna want to make a ground cloth, which is gonna be my trash bag and your poncho. We're gonna cut the bag open, kind of make it into a cloth so we have more space. We're going to be making a lean-to / A-frame. I want you to put a stake in the ground and tie a 2/2 hitch to the tarp and a taut line to the stake and make it tight. I'm going to tie a bowline around this tree and a taut line around the tarp and make it tight. We put the rope on top of the other end to make a loop. We do a wrap inside the loop. Then we go out of the loop and do another wrap. Then from there, it's just a matter of pulling it tight. You make your loop, then you wrap around. The difference is with the taut line, you wrap around again. Then on the taut line, you go over, over, make your loop, you go through, and you got your taut line. So it's all looking good. I'm just gonna inspect our nuts real quick though.
It's gonna be cold. There's bears out there. We're gonna die.
What are you doing?
Nothing.
Hope you enjoyed that little skit we created for you. We wanted to highlight a scenario that you may encounter in the real world and how to handle that situation, and have a little fun with it. In reality, things like this do happen. An injury, unexpected weather, you get lost. Having the equipment with you and the ability to set up a shelter to keep you dry and protect you from the elements is important. In this skit, we showed you a little bit about how to select a site for a location, how to use some of the elements around you in order to protect you and keep you warm. Now we're going to get into a little bit of types of tarps, what sizes you want to use, as well as some different configurations for how to set up a shelter and some of the pros and cons of those. The first thing I want to talk briefly about is what type of tarp that you have with you. So you can see here I have 3 different sizes and different types of tarps that we have here. This large blue one here is a 9 by 12 foot tarp. These large blue tarps are inexpensive. You can get them at Walmart, local hardware store. They're cheap, they're relatively durable, but they're a little bit bulky and heavy, so it's a trade-off that you want to get with the gear that you're purchasing. The next one, which I'll show you as well, is another blue tarp. This one is a 7 by 6 foot tarp. Again, same type of material, works good for smaller number of people. Whereas the larger blue tarp will give you options to set up a fully enclosed shelter or to be able to have a shelter for multiple people. The blue tarp is really going to give you a shelter for 1 person, maybe 2 if you want to squeeze in there, but it starts limiting what you can do with the tarp as far as protecting. The third tarp I have here is a lightweight tarp. This is one I actually made with as a backpacking material. It's one that compacts down to be really small, about the size of a soda can. It's light and compact, so I use it a lot for backpacking and for hammocking, as I have a tarp with me, but I can also use it for my emergency shelter. So it's lightweight, it's not as durable. Those types of tarps can be more expensive. Even the material themselves, when you make them, can be more expensive. It takes time to make them. But they do give you other options as far as being lightweight and having stuff that you want to set up. Though given the size of this tarp, this is something that really is 1 person, 2's pushing the limits on what you can do with that tarp.
So the first shelter we're going to do today is the lean-to shelter. It's the first shelter, it's the most simple, and it's the most basic. It starts with a simple ridge line that you set up between 2 trees or 2 poles, and then you take the tarp connected to this down to the ground. It's very fast to set up, gives you some basic protection from the wind and from the rain and sun, really from only one direction. As you can see, there's 3 sides that are still open to this, so you get a lot of airflow and a lot of movement through this, which isn't going to help you much in the winter, but it will help you a lot in the spring or for something that's very quick and easy to set up. All right, so what we have here is your basic A-frame tarp setup. It's created by running a ridge line between 2 poles or 2 trees that you then drape the tarp over into the shape of an A-frame. Then you tie out each of the 4 corners to create the frame. Basic and easy tarp setup. This one I set up relatively low. Again, for cold weather and winter weather, you want to provide as much containment of warmth that you have in there so that you don't lose it. If it was summer and it was hotter, you could raise this up higher and still give yourself protection from the weather. Benefit of this tarp is it does give you protection on 2 sides, but you still have a lot of openings on both sides, so you need to be very careful on which direction you set it up so that the wind is coming into one of the sides of the tarp and not through the tarp, so you'll lose a lot of temperature there. One of the key things to think about when you do a setup like this is when you have a ridge line that runs underneath your tarp. If it rains, water will run down this rope here and will end up dripping at the lowest spot, which would typically be in the middle of your shelter. So what I've added here was a drip line, which is just another rope, girth hitched around my ridge line, slid directly underneath the tarp here. So as the water runs down this, it will hit my drip line and go down the drip line and not underneath my tarp, and keep my ground dry underneath there. So this tarp here is a modification of the A-frame. So it still has the same design of the ridge line and the tie out to the two corners on the tarp. The main difference is that the tie out on one side is about a quarter of the way down the tarp. What that allows you to do is use the remaining quarter of the tarp to create a floor that you lay on. This is one of the benefits of having a larger tarp, is that you can use the tarp for not only your covering from above, but can also be used for your ground covering to protect you from the water on the ground as well. So the final one that we have here is called a plow point. It's a very basic tarp to set up. All you need is one pole or tree that you tie one corner of your tarp to, and you diagonally down to the other side here. So it's tied up there, and it's staked down at the three corners around there. As you can see, it gives you a lot of protection from two sides, from wind and from rain, but relatively open from the side there. So it gives you a good perspective of, protection from the rain and what elements, as well as size it's in there. But as you can see, the name comes around to being plow point, because it looks like the point of a plow as you're coming through with your 4 stakes and tie outs on the point there. Very quick and simple tarp to set up, and gives you good protection from the weather. Again, with this one, no ground protection, so you have to have separate protection from the ground. So here I've set up another tarp, another emergency shelter here, using my small backpacking tarp, the one I use for my day pack. Again, it's great size for a single person. I could probably squeeze 2 in there if we're really close together. Works great for the size. But as you can see here, I set this up, instead of using a tree, not every time you're gonna find a place that you're backpacking using a tree, I use my trekking pole, tied the ropes around the pole here, looping it around the handle, and then tied it out with stakes here, giving me my 1 point to lift on that plow point design. So we showed you a few shelters, a lot of different ways you can do emergency shelters. A lot of it depends on what gear you have with you and the weather you're setting up for. These are just a few different designs that you have. Main thing is to keep something over you, to keep you dry, as well as to help keep you warm and block the wind as you work in your shelter.
But as with all of your gear, the thing you have to keep in mind is practice and set up and carrying it with you. You have to carry your gear with you in your day pack when you go backpacking, you're outdoors, because if it's not with you, it's not going to help you. Second is practice setting it up. We showed you with a couple different tarps. We showed you several different styles of setting up a shelter. But if you don't get out and actually do it, understand the gear that you have with you and understand how to set up and works for you, you're not going to be able to do that very quickly in an emergency or a situation where we have weather coming in.
So how about that, Trailman? We had, so are there any questions for Mr. Bialois? And while you guys are trying to think of a couple, that A-frame style tent, I had some trailmen several years ago use that style, and they were thinking ahead. They put the side towards the west where the wind was coming in. We were getting some rain, and he really thought this through. The only problem is that as the night progressed, he didn't look at the weather report ahead of time, and as the night progressed, the wind shifted from the west to the north. And when it came down through the north, coming from the north, it went right straight through the middle of his tent. If he had had a plow point, he could have covered both sides and protected himself for those two directions. So, Trailman, that design is an excellent design if you're looking at it from when you're out in an emergency situation. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Bialois? Where is, hey, didn't David do an awesome job? I mean, he was the experienced trailman in that whole thing, right? And so your adventurers and your older navigators, he was calm. He was a little frustrated, right? He was a little frustrated, but man, he held it together. Asa's got a question. So why don't we unmute Asa here? Asa, why don't you go ahead and ask your question to Mr. Bialoas?
Do you want to say something?
Go ahead,
there's
Asa.
one. There we go. Awesome. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Bialoas? You can type it in if you want, or you can raise your hand, unmute yourself, and jump in real quick.
I have one for Mr. Bialoas. Where do you get that material that you made that really cool emergency small pack for your day pack?
There's a few places online you can order from. The one I tend to use is a company called Ripstop by the Roll. They have all kinds of gear. They're really targeted for making your own gear, whether for camping, for backpacks, hammocks, tents, etc. They also have a lot of plans for how to do that.
Other questions? Who has a question for Mr. Bialoas? You can unmute yourself and ask if you'd like, or you could type it in the chat box and I'll ask it out for you.
Hello. Hear us.
While you guys are thinking of a question, I'm just going to kind of give you a little tip for our next gathering in 2 weeks. Mr. Jim Hinkst is going to be teaching us about winter first aid. There's some unique things about that. You may know him from fire starting back in the spring, but Mr. Hinkst is a firefighter paramedic in Columbus, Ohio, and he is going to teach us about some basic winter first aid type stuff in just 2 weeks. So, do we have any other questions that came up? Sean?
I don't see any more questions.
Okay.
We're a couple minutes
right.
today. And so, Little Hawk, would you please close us again in prayer today? Thank you, everyone, for joining us on this third episode
fantastic.
of Polar Vortex. The information
Great
will
to
be
see
out
you guys
today. Okay. Little Hawk, take it away for us.
Trailman honors God. Heavenly Father, thank you again for the opportunity to gather tonight. Please bless everybody as they leave this call and go about their evening. Thank you for letting the Polar Vortex happen this year. We ask you to watch over everyone here until we meet again. All of this we ask in your holy name. Amen.
Amen. Hey, Trailman, go and do great things, as Mr. Kent Marks always tells you. Go do great things this week. Go try out that emergency test setting. Also, go and take some hikes and see if you can get a Canadian goose. And there will be handouts coming along with the videos. In fact, the videos are already there in place on my YouTube channel, so you are welcome to go. We'll see you again in 2 weeks for the 4th episode. Have a great night.